The views, opinions, or advice offered by this show's host do not necessarily reflect those of News Talk 780 KOH or its parent company, Cumulus Media. This is Bosma On Business with award-winning entrepreneur Mike Bosma, sponsored by Keystone CPAs. We're getting Northern Nevada back to business.
Good morning. This is Mike Bosma, your business savvy CPA, coming to you from the Dreampilot Films studio. Did a little change of course for Bosma On Business. Of course, each and every Saturday we bring to you 60 minutes of action-packed business adventure. Of course, as we get out and as you've listened to this show over the years, you know that we try and give you a little bit more business acumen each and every Saturday morning. Of course, today, no different. On today's installment of Bosma On Business, Bianco from Dreampilot Films is going to talk to us about his journey. So without further ado, Bianco.
Thanks, Mike.
So we start this out with like the elevator pitch. So if I ran into you in the elevator or at the bar and having drinks, I said, "Oh, you're a business owner? Give me the quick 411 about what your business is."
I'll use a key phrase that one of our former employees said, who I do hold him dearly in my heart. But Tyler told us one day that video production is 10% filming and 90% moving stuff around. So essentially, I'm a moving company.
Okay, you're a glorified moving company.
But
okay.
Yeah, video production, and we handle everything from commercials to national speakers to documentaries and everything in between.
Now, how'd you get into the business?
Basically, I was obsessed with cameras from a very young age. My grandfather gave me one of those big old, even before the high 8 cameras, you rest it on your shoulder and capture in very small resolution family memories. And I used to be the videographer for our family since the 80s, and just became obsessed with it. And as the years went on, I learned that I didn't really want to sit there. If I had to work for a living, I'd rather be creative than sit there and crunch data all day long.
So you wouldn't want to be a CPA,
right? I was gonna say nothing wrong with that, but I think it's not for me. I will say plenty of stresses, and I do spend more than 100% of my time at my desk.
Right.
But yeah.
Right. No, I got you. So you kind of always had an interest in it. Now, did you work in other audio video companies before you started Dreampilot? How did Dreampilot become a thing?
So it became a thing. I was a musician for about 20 years.
Okay. What instrument?
Singer. I was a singer.
A vocalist.
Well,
okay.
I also did play trumpet and trombone. I will attribute much of my regiment to those days. But trumpet and trombone. Eventually, I found a voice in singing, and I did very well at it. And so through the years, we tried really hard to make a living from it.
And how'd that work itself out?
They call them starving musicians for a reason. Yeah. So eventually, being a starving musician, I was too broke to pay for my own music videos. So I bought a camera, and that's how it all started.
Okay, there you go. Now, so there's always that inflection point, Brandon, when you go from doing it for yourself and then trying to monetize it or charge somebody else to do that. And like, I remember back when I was in college taking my accounting classes, and people say, "Oh, you're an accountant, you do taxes." And I'm like, well, those are really two separate things, but I've always taken an interest in taxes. And so I started doing people's taxes. And I remember, my main competition was TurboTax. So it cost $40 back in the day to buy the software to do your taxes. And so they would say, "Well, hey, if you would do it for what it cost me to do TurboTax, I'll let you do my taxes." I'm like, $40 takes me about an hour. I'm making $40 an hour. I'm killing it. So how'd that go when you went from doing your own music videos to now trying to charge somebody to do theirs?
It was kind of a strange area of my life. I was working for a very large national importer for office supply products, and worked there for about 8 years. And that was where I was realizing that, heck, I wasn't going to make $1 million being a musician, and I'm making pretty good money crunching data and being a salesperson for this office importer. But I wanted to do something creative, so I thought, I have this camera. Let me put a little thing out there and see what I can do. And somebody had messaged me. I think I put out a message on social media somehow, MySpace or Facebook or something, whatever it was at the time. And somebody wrote me back and said, "Hey, we're having a wedding and our videographer just bailed on us. And how much would it cost to have you film our thing?" And I thought, crap, I never thought about numbers before.
That's why I asked.
I don't know what to charge. And so I just winged out a number, and she hired me to do her music video. And
Well, so it's interesting
for her wedding. I'm sorry.
Her wedding. So, but that's where what I help business owners understand is what Lance Gilman taught me about pricing. Okay, and so do you know Lance?
I've heard of the name.
Okay,
Possibly a book.
Probably his biggest investment outside of Taurino Industrial Center is the Mustang Ranch. So right, he's a brothel owner, and I remember I'm a member of Entrepreneurs Organization, all business owners, good size, over $1 million in sales, and we had the behind the scenes tour of the Mustang Ranch, and it's like, I've never been there, but that's okay if you have, there's no judgment here. But I was like, okay, I just want to see how this thing works. So you walk in and there's this huge candy dish, right when you walk in, and a menu of all of these things that people have done to them, most of which I'd never heard of before. Anyway, but so I said, Lance, there's no prices here. How do you just, I go, what are the prices? And he says, Mike, when somebody walks in the door, they know where they're going and why they're going here. They have an idea in mind what they're going to spend. And we call it what's your up to amount. And so when they say, well, how much are you prepared to spend up to? And I go, then they tell me, and then that's the first thing on the list. Always. And then it gets higher from there.
Well, if all business wasn't that way, that'd be amazing.
Well, it's that thing, right? Where I think by and large, when people, you're in the services business, when people sell their time, right, or use equipment, we're competing with things in their own head, which is why by and large, I work with other business owners, because they generally have a better head screwed on them than somebody else that just wants me to do their tax return for the cost of a TurboTax fee. So, but a little more realistic expectation. But that's where it's like some people in this space, they refuse to do weddings now, right? Because they're like, Bridezilla is a thing. So it's just, know who your audience is, but then know what you're prepared to spend up to. And I think those are things that I call it your PhD from the School of Hard Knocks that you get when you're like, okay, you start to learn, right? Because then you ever have a situation where you bid not enough and then you had to go back to the well and ask for a little more love on that?
I can't say that we've gone back and asked for love. Now, at this point in time, I'm blessed enough to have a team of about 10 full-time staff here, but we haven't had to go back and ask for more money per se, but we have killed ourselves and made probably $8 an hour doing the job for the price that we quoted.
Right. No, that's it. Right. And I think that it's an interesting one, right? Where, it's called the beta version for a reason. And so if you're out there and you're thinking of wanting to start a business, oftentimes it's a good thing to tell people, don't overpromise, we do a lot of professional services in and around accounting, if we're deploying a software solution, people are like, oh, well, how much are you going to charge for this? And oftentimes when you're just deploying a solution that you haven't really fully mastered yet, we just say, we're going to give you a range. We're going to give you love on the range, right? So we're giving the beta test version, but also you're going to have to work with us on this thing because we're probably not going to be able to deliver 100%, right? Trying to right size expectations. So you got 10 folks working for you. How I'm just, I'm just fascinated on pricing though. So if somebody wants to come and, it's a beautiful studio, how do you decide how much to charge? Because you didn't ask me what my up to amount was.
Yeah, we didn't. And there's still things that we can learn in business. But I will say that we've been pushing pretty hard the last few years. Ever since a few years before the pandemic, we started to grow. And we're constantly learning. We're still on the method where we're deciding where the value could be for somebody. And we're thinking in the local market here. Maybe a value-based pricing sort of model, but we kind of understand how much a service could help someone, and we build these packages and we kind of price things off packages. And it is pulling a note from wedding videographers and people that do that, because that's where we came from, and it's the only thing we know, unfortunately. Right. I have never had a mentor in the industry, and it's been a tough way to learn things, but yeah, I guess we're just building packages and selling them that way. Well,
and I would encourage you to check out Entrepreneurs Organization, or EO for short, because one of the things that EO, global organization, but one of the things that they do really, really well is is they have these groups of businesses that are the same businesses in different geographies. So I'm part of a CPA group. So all CPA firms of size, right? I think the math was, if you have more than $1 million in sales, you're the top 4% of this, of all businesses. It's crazy, right? And then we have this program called the Accelerator Program that's from $250,000 in sales to $1 million. So it's all about having the scale of the organization. How do I grow this beyond me? And then at the end, which is what, on my CPA, if I put my CPA hat on, and because we have, business brokers, CPA, and wealth advisors. So people are, when you get to the end, you're like, okay, how can I sell this so I'm not tethered to my business, like tethered to my desk, and how much do I sell the business for? Is that enough to air quotes retire? Because nobody ever retires. They just are doing this less and something else more, and then manage the money afterwards, right? So it's kind of this ecosystem of finishing. But if the best advice I can give you, Brandon, is finish with the end in mind. And like, how do you build a business that has value, not only creates income for yourself, but also has value that somebody else is going to buy? Right. So that has intrinsic enterprise value that I think oftentimes is lost when people are, because like you said, you're like, I had this idea, like that's how all businesses start. I had an idea, when I started my CPA firm, and I went out of the large national CPA firms into it was called the Bosma Group CPAs. I ran into my future business coach on a flight from Chicago, Illinois to Reno. Who knew, right? She kind of helped me see some things maybe a little differently. And the next thing you know, I've got 15 employees and we're off to the races. So, but I think those are things when, with what I wished I'd known then, which I learned through the Accelerator Program and EO is, creating systems and processes that are scalable, then you're not limited to yourself to be able to grow, and that's where I think a lot of times people, that are tuning into this show, they're trying to get these hacks on, how do I get past where I'm at? How do I continue to grow? I mean, a good example of that, I had a guest on this show. You can go to bosmaonbusiness.com if you want to check it out. But I had this great set of brothers. They out from India. They started like the third microbrewery in India, and they built that company to scale. And I was like, I'm thinking microbrewery, the only thing I have here in Reno, it's kind of cool. My son had one for a minute. And so I'm talking to him about this thing. And when I'm doing the show, it's like midnight there. And I realized that he, and we had to do it on Teams because capturing the audio that way.
Right.
But so he's on video, and I realized that there's a whole party behind him. It's like he interrupted his birthday party to do the show. I'm like, well, that's awesome. But then we're kind of pressing in, like how many employees do you have? He says, I have 2,000 employees.
Wow.
Right? Like, okay, so you're not the microbrewery on the corner, right? He's this huge microbrewery.
Yeah, wow.
Right? He's like a macrobrewery, right? So, but he built that thing to scale it. So now it's like, and it just changes your perspective, right? If you're kind of swimming in bigger waters, changes that perspective a bit. And I think those are things where, when we think about, when we come back from this break, Brandon, let's talk about how to scale this business, create value, not only for you, but also for the team and your clients alike. When we come back, we call it Bosma On Business. Welcome back to Bosma On Business. Your host, Mike Bosma, talking about, taking that passion that you have and creating a business out of it. And I think oftentimes, as I've talked to literally hundreds of business owners on the show over the years, it's sometimes that the best thing I ever did, and sometimes the worst thing I ever did, had this idea, like maybe was it a good idea or bad pizza? So in studio, in the Dreampilot studios, Brandon Bianco, CEO of Dreampilot Studios. So Brandon, as we were talking before the break, about how to scale this business, how to grow it. Like, if I were to put on my business advisor hat, I'd say, okay, well, where do you want to take the business? Because so Vern Harnish, he founded EO, and wrote the book, Rockefeller Habits, has this thing where you can get to somewhere between 10 and 15 folks and just hit this wall, this glass ceiling that's very difficult to get through, because it's really the maximum amount of people that you can effectively manage yourself. And then you need to hire managers to manage people. And that usually doesn't pay for itself for a while. So what's the big dream, the big vision for Dreampilot Studios? The big dream is it's ever evolving. I will say that. We've pivoted a few times, and we're lucky enough to be in an industry that is constantly growing. So there's a lot of industries that have suffered recently, but ours is growing, and that's exciting to be in. Currently, and I will say for the past couple of years since the pandemic, our goal is to become
not just a local video production company where we have, a staff of 10. I would say the next step up would probably be becoming an agency, which is where we have not only video production and photographers, but we have a whole printing division that we can help. And there probably be a few staff in that, web design, graphic design, marketing, and advertising and things like that. And possibly, my pipe dream right now, which hopefully will grow in the future, would be to have a location in another city somewhere.
Okay, right. So it's just like when you see your first employee, right? So if you're starting your thing, like that first wedding that you did, and then you're like, okay, and you probably did all of it, right, yourself. So I got this. And then, then there's this inflection point when you hire your first employee, right? Where you're like, oh, now I got overhead. Like, oh, God, I got to learn how to do payroll, do all this stuff. So same thing with having your first office, your second remote location. We just acquired a CPA firm in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. It's a whole nother logistical, because our system, we built the back end of it so it can scale. But now I have more people at work in Chattanooga, Tennessee than I do in the state of Nevada, right? And so who's supposed to manage all these people? Who do they ask their questions to? So like I had this epiphany that I'm now on Eastern time zone, so that my day starts at 6 o'clock in the morning, or actually 5 o'clock in the morning, Pacific. And that just, it's great. It extends my day. And my wife's like, what happened? Where did you go? So, and that's where, and oftentimes a good way to do that, I would say, because, I mentioned I'm a business broker too, is to join forces with somebody, and because everybody has the same problem. So I'll just give an example, Brandon. So, if, what I realized as growing a CPA firm, I couldn't grow that CPA firm if I couldn't master the people part of the equation. It just was not going to happen. So I hired my chief people officer. Her name's Colleen Morrison, out of Austin, Texas. So you wonder, why did you hire your Nevada firm, Mike? Why did you hire out of Austin? Because Austin has the largest accounting school in the United States. So I figure if I'm going to be recruiting, I want people that are being recruited from their own backyard, right? Because now it doesn't matter if people live in Nevada or not. In fact, there was an article or a news story that Channel 8 did last year. There are no accountants in Reno. The people that are graduated here are going somewhere else. So we had to pivot, just like you said. And then, okay, we're just going to look at this differently. We're going to have different people. But the fact that I have somebody in that neck of the woods to run that office is everything. So I needed the first step to hire the chief people officer. She found my partner that now is, when we acquired this office, now he's running that office. So it's like, but that was not brain damage for us because I've got people to do all of it. So have you thought out like maybe different ideas to get that second office, or is that just too far down the horizon?
It's a bit far right now, but I am constantly thinking, actually building blocks. The best thing that I could say for advice to anybody that's wondering how to scale, and from coming from somebody who has scaled very little, but is still blessed in life. I've been in business for six or almost 7 years now, which is lucky. But my biggest thing is I feel like if you can build the footsteps, if you can build the pathway, you can get to anywhere. And the pathway starts with the first stone. So I'm always thinking about strategy, even though it's a bit far off. I'm also lucky enough to be surrounded by a few very intelligent and very passionate people that have the same amount of passion for this company that I do. And in my opinion, it's very lucky to have that. So we're constantly talking about ideas and building, the future strategy to get us there. We actually have our director of operations has already offered to go run the company in the alternative state or country, wherever that is.
Wherever they want to go to. Like when it's cold there, I'm going to San Diego, right?
It would probably be Costa Rica, actually.
Costa Rica, right? Yeah, there's always there's always somebody has an idea. What they really want to do, right? So, yeah, because it is interesting. I on the business broker side of it, I have had a couple transactions with companies like yours, and there's actually a lot of private equity out there that is funding the purchases of these companies because as you just alluded to, if you could, advertising marketing is actually a very broad genre. So and there's specialties within it. Your video, audio, But if somebody wanted something like that, they didn't have it, it's expensive, right? It's very, very difficult to scale that way. So, but like if you can join forces with somebody, and so, the number one reason business owners can't do business with other business owners is ego, right? They're like, no, I have my way, and I've been competing against you all these years, and it's a little different, right? Yes. Or you're like, okay, well, can we collaborate on this, and then how do we look at it? And a little bit different perspective, but yeah, I would say, there's like people would engage me to say, if there's a company that meets this in NAICS code, North American Industry Classification Code, that is videography, video production, just like keep an eye out for it. If those companies come up in your world for sale, consider buying it, right? And so I'll tell you why that's the best nugget I can give you today is that if because people are like, well, let's say you bought a business that's doing $1 million in revenue that's spinning off $300,000 of profit. That's kind of an average how services firm, how they should work, see that, right? So, and normally that's going to sell for 3x what the owner's pulling out. So you're doing $1 million in sales, making $300,000, I'm going to sell it for $900,000. You can do an SBA loan for $900,000 for less than $100,000, cash, right? But how much money is it taking? How much money does it make? It makes $300,000 a year. So, it's like this easy equation to say, I'm going to spend $100,000. I'm net 2 positive the first year. Yeah, that's how it works, right? It's like no brainer. So and then but then you just look for companies that are pretty much self-encapsulated so that they can run autonomously. And then that's the easiest way to scale, right? Mm-hmm. But you just have to be careful, because if you spend $900,000 on a business that's terrible, right? Terrible people, terrible clients, no fun, right? So that's where you have to look. You have to kiss a dozen frogs to find the one that's the prince. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So but it's just one way. Like it's very when I explain that to people, and that's the nice thing about the business broker part of that. I'm like, this is how this works. This is a no-brainer. You can get this deal done very easily, and then you can effectively double. Or significantly grow kind of overnight, or you don't have to. Trying to grow organically, as is a grind. Right. Yes. I got to put proposals out. Of course, everybody, anytime you give anybody a proposal, they tell you, no, this is too low, Brandon. You can do better. Go higher. Nobody ever says that. Right? Right? If only. If only, right? If only. So I guess those are things. It's just as you're thinking about it, just consider an acquisition. And usually people haven't done it, but it is the easiest way to grow. So let's do this when we come back. I really want to talk about some of the more nuanced tax parts of this business and the people component. When we come back, we call it Bosma On Business. Welcome back to Bosma On Business. Your host, Mike Bosma. On the bottom of the hour, we always talk a little bit about, the tax nuances to whatever guest I've got on. And I'd say for you as a services company, a lot of people, let's say this, you always start with an LLC, right? Because you can be a single member LLC. You don't have any tax filings. You don't have to do payroll. It makes it easy. But now you have an entity that owns the assets in a real business. And then you go from there. And then once you start making money, you'll consider an S corporation. Now, the one thing about the S corporation is usually that, if you pay yourself less, you'll make more money, just because you're not paying self-employment tax on that, but you have to pay yourself a reasonable wage. That's true. But the other thing that I think what people kind of lose sight of sometimes is they do the S election like, well, gosh, I'm not worth anything. I'm hardly here at all. Pay me $40,000. I'm good. But then they go try and qualify for a house or a car. Well, you don't make any money. You can't afford this. So, you got to be smart about that. But the other thing that I see, oftentimes, especially if we're talking about putting companies together potentially, is the S corporation doesn't work so well anymore. And so, and once you're in an S corporation, you can't get assets out of an S corporation without paying tax. So there is this inversion that you can do of the S corporation, though. And I won't bore you with the details, but but I just want you to put this little nugget in the back of your head is, let's say you and another buddy or somebody else that another marketing or video firm decide we're going to do business together, and then you're like, oh well, we're an S corp, so we're going to add them as a member or as a shareholder of the S corp. And don't do that. And that creates its own set of problems because everything's got to be pro rata. It's easy to bust your S election in that moment. So do an inversion. So basically, you end up spinning up a parent and spinning down and converting your current LLC. That's currently taxed as an S corp, and the steps is becomes a subchapter S subsidiary, and then converts back to an LLC, and then that's the entity that you're doing business with. So the business then becomes a partnership, but then the asset then you still own the S corp on top. And so that way, and you do that. And the beauty of it, that partnership now is the same employer identification number, all the same NAICS, the same company it was. It's just now doing business, but for the federal government as a partnership instead of an S corp, and you just did that tax free. So
fantastic.
Yeah, and that just gives owners flexibility, because some people on the other side of it, they probably have their own S corp, right? Because that's ultimately what happens, right? So your S corp, their S corp, drop new entity. But now that's got a new EIN. And sometimes we want to keep the employer identification number in the same legal entity. So that if we have all these great contracts, that's what we're putting in. We want to keep the contracts. We don't want to lose that stuff. So usually two S corps, they come together, they do the same thing. And then, so then you end up with both of those, and you control everything. You don't have to worry about losing the intellectual property that you've worked so hard to put together. I can't help myself, Brandon. I apologize.
No, it sounds like I need to spend a lot more time speaking with you, because I'm very interested and excited by all of this.
Yeah, no, it's just you can make so much forward momentum just knowing how the tax stuff works. And that's when I worked for the very large CPA firms. We did this for the Fortune 500. It was great for them. They got all they need. But for most people that I'm passionate about, they're just out to lunch. So, they don't get the access to that stuff. So you just try and help out everybody. But so what we're talking before the break, as we're talking about, growth and those things, the people, what's the culture? What are you driving for culture in Dreampilot Studios?
Going back to my days in corporate America, I realized that driving people in a way where you're constantly trying to produce and produce and produce, it is good on the bottom line for financial reasons, but it does create an America that I don't particularly want to live in. And so my culture for Dreampilot, and hopefully continues on into the future, is a place where we're productive and we're creating a positive work environment for not only the people and our clients receiving the work that we do, but the people that are here working are able to enjoy what they do and not get burnt out on life. And unfortunately in this industry, that the burnout is pretty real, because people take their work home with them here. As you're constantly thinking about edits or how to get better, you're always learning. And if you don't ever have a nice work environment, then you can get burned out very easily. So we do try to cultivate that.
Okay. No, and that's, I think, do you have that mission statement or vision statement written to, reduced to writing anywhere? Or
no.
Put it in the back here.
I do have one of my favorite things, speaking of acquisitions on the previous segment, but my favorite quote is, "A rising tide lifts all boats." And I do feel like that applies to the work environment as well, with our culture here. But no, I don't have it written down anywhere.
So okay, and then how do you determine how much to pay people? Because these people have been you've known for a long time, How do you determine what a fair and reasonable wage is?
So we do research. We do market research.
And this is just you and me. Nobody watches this.
No worries. We between us, and actually I don't care. I'm very transparent, but we do a lot of market research. We look at what people pay in the industry. We look at standard wages, and we look at what people should be paid. And we kind of find a happy medium in between there. And I always ask people, we do interview a lot. We have not a very high turnover, but we're also pushing towards growth. So, and we've had periods of the opposite. Right. So we've gone through a lot of applications and a lot of hiring, which I never thought I would be a part of so much hiring. But during the interview process, I always ask people, what do you prefer to be paid? Logically, what do you prefer to be paid for what you're worth? And then what's the minimum that you could take? And we try to get as close to that preferred pay as possible. But we also do a lot of data analysis, and we understand what we can pay somebody. So when we're growing, before we even approach application process or interview process, we know kind of where we're going to be paid. Right. But it's based off of the market, more or less.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I have this standard philosophy, Brandon, is I want to pay people as much as humanly possible. So, and it's great because especially like new recruits out of college, right? We'll pay me $100,000. Like, great. Yeah. How can you just plug and play? And this is what that wage based on the survey results say, and that you should be able to do. You should be able to review a tax return. You should be able to identify issues. You should be able to communicate with the client these issues. And they're like, I can't do. I'm like, they turn white, right? Because you don't know what to do, right? So you're down here, and I'm going to give you information. I'm going to spend about 2 years training you so that you know what side is up and what side is down. in this business, and I'm going to give you all that skill set, and you're not going to pay for yourself for a long time. So I'm going to invest in you, and I'm going to tell you you're going to make a commitment to me for 5 years. And if you can't do that, I'm probably not interested in hiring you. If people are like, 5 years, that's like forever to a lot of these millennials, right?
Yeah.
So but the people that sign on, they appreciate we're in this thing together. And if you can drive more value, I'm all over billing for it. If you're creating value for our clients, that's why our clients are our clients, right? They need that. So if you can do it, I mean, and you're performing at a higher level, of course we can charge for it because you're performing at a higher level. It's no brainer, and I think once that just eliminated the schism with the team of, especially once we started Keystone 2.5 years ago. And there was a couple of people that were like, well, shouldn't I get a raise? I'm like, we're taking this, we have this idea for this business and we're going to keep everybody the same. But like, why would you think you're entitled to a raise? Well, I'm taking a risk going with you. It's like, well, stay there then. Hell, I'm good. I'm good. You do you, I'll do me. But if they were like, yeah, because it doesn't work that way. You haven't increased your skill set, so there's nothing that I can charge differently for. So, and that's where it's like on your side, I just imagine the same, right? It's like, hey, I want to take care of our people, but we also need to have a profit so that we have a healthy, vibrant business. But best way to think about it. How long before you decide to sell out? I mean, to sell out. No, I mean, just to, do you have an exit strategy for this thing?
I don't right now. My exit strategy is success. And right now I can't exactly pinpoint when that's going to happen. We are blessed with profitability, okay. But no, and I still have, I'll be entering my 40s very soon. So for me, I have a few years left of being able to push as hard as I can and continue and strive, for the foreseeable future. But one day there is going to be an exit strategy, and I hope it's not for too long from now. But
no, I got you. Well, and what I would encourage is, so one of the things I did when I started my first CPA firm was called Bosma Group, is and it was a heavy lift by not only me but my family, and everybody's working, everybody's putting desks together after hours, the whole thing, and it was a big risk. I mean, it was a significant risk. Had a pretty good job in corporate America, but had this vision for what this thing could be. So, and I just said, if we got through that first year, I want to be able to celebrate. And so I booked this stupid expensive cruise that in my accountant brain, you'd never spend that much money to take a vacation. But I said, I looked at, my personal financial statement, right? Because I'm an accountant, right? Like I do that every year. And I said, look, this is because now I have a business that's creating value. This is what, and when I started, it was worth zero because there wasn't a business. Now this year, this business is worth this amount of money. I'm like, so although I feel cash poor, right? Because all business owners generally feel cash poor.
Very much so.
Right? Because it takes a lot of money, a lot of capital to run a business. So it's like, no, this makes sense. So we can celebrate that. So I didn't feel like just my wealth was just what was in the bank account. I have, work in progress and receivables. So I just haven't monetized yet. I have to finance all the labor for that out front. I'm sure you're the same way.
I do feel very confident in the fact that while bank accounts could always look better, I am building something substantial. And I do, and let me just say, I don't have per se an exit strategy, but my ears are always open.
Right. Well, and that's what I say. If you did the valuation, and that's so you can see the comps and see how they work, and more importantly, you'll see how your multiples go up as your income goes up, and as your EBITDA or self-discretionary earnings, and that usually becomes like, oh, okay, well, that's what I like to like. Well, if I put two of these together, like it's literally 1 + 1 = 3. So you're like, it's not that much more, brain damage to do that as long as I have the systems to run it.
Right.
Then, so that's, why you take those leaps of faith and grow the empire. Cause you're like, yeah, cause I'd much rather have 3 than 1. Right. So that's kind of the math behind it anyway.
I love the way you think. And I really do want to spend a lot more time talking with you.
Love to do it. Love to help you. And I think, that's where, a lot of times, the reason that we're doing these podcasts is just, Brandon, the struggles that you have in business, struggle I have in business, every business owner has the same struggles. It's all the same stuff. Like meeting after we do free 1-hour consultations. Come in, I'll try and be as informative as I can in that hour to give you as much value in that hour. We do that for free. 775-786-4900 at Bosma, keystone.cpa. But I think those things we want to do that because we think it's a good and right thing to do. That's our gift back to the universe. It's the universe blessed. God bless me more than I can ever imagine. hey, we got to return the favor. But that's where, if, a lot of times it just takes these little nuggets to kind of keep moving that agenda forward to really create something great. And then, all of a sudden you work 20 years, then you become an overnight success, which I still haven't figured out. Where did this guy come from? So anyway, no, that's a lot of fun. So let's do this. I want to hear from Brandon Bianco, owner of Dreampilot Studios, the number one thing he wished he would have known before he went into business. It's Bosma On Business. Welcome back to Bosma On Business. Hey, the number should be on the bottom of the screen. So if you need to give me a holler or get one of those free 1-hour consultations, make sure you do so. We'll be able to try and create as much value in that hour as humanly possible. Brandon Bianco, owner, CEO of Dreampilot Studios. This journey that you've been in, kind of getting this business together, and kudos to you. Put a great team, great studio.
Thank you.
So, we leave our listeners with that big aha, the big takeaway. So, what do you wish you'd have known before you jumped into this thing?
It's a tough question for me to answer because there's so many things. Obviously, I think any successful business owner, and also the non-successful ones, would probably have a million things that they wish they would have knew before they jumped into it. But the number one thing, I think, and it's something I'm still learning, and I even was impacted quite a bit today by it, but I am been pushed the last 12 months or so by this, is I wish that I could have known the power of investment via outside investment, and also things like acquisition and things before I started, because I could have been, now hindsight is 2020, but always. I could have been much farther along if I would have started with those types of goals in mind, rather than the way I did do it, which was let's build everything with sweat, blood, and tears, and hard. And we're lucky enough, I have built this business through investing in it through my own money, but I haven't had to take any loans or anything out to do this. And I will say I'm pretty proud of that. But also, I wish I would have spent more time learning about outside investment. Right.
No, I appreciate that. And I think that's where just to backfill that a little bit, Brandon, is when do you think the best time to get a line of credit is?
Well, I think that the best time is before you start a business.
Well, actually, so they won't give it to you, but usually it's when you don't need it, right? When you're flush with cash, right? Like, no, I'm good. That's the time the bank's like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll give you this line of credit because you don't need it.
Yes.
Okay, so that's where, like I was telling you on break, I acquired this other CPA firm this last week, and when I looked at the projections, because we're taking on a lot of overhead with that acquisition and costs of it, and I think it's going to be great. But one of the ways that I know it's going to be great is because if I had this great team, and I know if to have that team through April 15th of 2024, I'm going to be golden. But I've got to carry them for a couple months to get there. Well, I have that line of credit to do that. So that way, and I know if they would look at the bank would have looked at my books right now when I've got all this overhead. Banks are not risk takers. So they're like, I did it when I was flush, and then now I got the line of credit, and I'm, that's going to help get through this little dry spell. So, and that's where I just say, the power of other people's money. And that's what you actually said. It's almost a badge of honor, right? Like, hey, I haven't had to take a loan. Well, take the loan.
I sure wish I would have. I will say I totally agree with that, and 100%. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, it's just that kind of stuff, just so you can stay flush with cash and but it's hard. It's so hard. Like, why am I paying interest on this? I have the cash. So, and same deal as, like I remember I had a loan. It was 3.75%. And I was like, man, why don't I just pay? But I took my own advice, and now when the interest rates are like 10%, I'm like, I'm never paying that loan off. It's, I get better interest on T-bills now. This is a no-brainer. So no, that's the game. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your journey. Of course, if you have anything, like when you get that acquisition done, we'll have you back and talk about it. We call it the good, the bad, the ugly of buying a business. And then, of course, next week, we're going to have more business owners, more business awesome. Until then, you business owners, keep that business engine humming. It's Bosma On Business.